One guy's seen it, the other guy hasn't. First guy's gonna tell the second guy all about it while they both get drunk.
All right, welcome to yet another episode of One Guy's Seen It, the only podcast where one guy has seen the movie, the other guy has not seen the movie, and the first guy is going to try to convince the second guy to see the movie. And if he succeeds, which he most likely will, they will take a short break, watch the movie, come back, nerd out about the movie, and decide how many beers or various alcoholic beverages that you need to enjoy the movie, all while getting progressively more inebriated themselves, because that is what they choose to do with their sentience. But without any further ado, rigmarole, hoopla, or ballyhoo, let's get into it. Sumner, give me the skinny, as though we have not been talking for the last hour about Baldur's Gate 3.
I know. I feel like the last 7 episodes we've done, we've ended up talking about Baldur's Gate 3 for at least a fair chunk of the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It is a ubiquitous element of both of our lives right now. It has completely consumed us because it is a masterpiece of modern gaming.
It is a cultural cornerstone now, so I think we've earned the right to talk about it. But,
I mean, let me just put it this way. I don't think I've ever watched YouTube. I've never watched a YouTube live stream of a voice actor panel for any video game in my entire life.
I've watched that
as
too.
much as I loved The Last of Us and some of these games that have made such a massive impression on me, I sat on my couch and watched the cast of Baldur's Gate 3 just talk about nothing for an hour because it was so fascinating to see what they really looked like.
Yeah. I watched the one where they played D&D together, and it was super cool.
Oh man, I need to see that. See, that's what's funny, right? I thought that playing Baldur's Gate 3 would kind of get me into the live play D&D stuff. It's just cringy for me. At least the ones that I've seen just feel cringy. I can't quite get over it yet, but maybe I just need to see the right live plays.
I went to a live one recently with some of our friends here, and it was actually really fun. I had never been in a D&D session, but they were into it, but they were just having a good time, having some drinks, and the dungeon master gets into it, and I was talking to the guy for a really long time, and he was talking about how he set everything up. I was like, God, that seems like so much work. He's like, dude, I fucking love it. I have 3 other campaigns going on right now. And I was like,
that's awesome.
Which is I love that dedication. So I don't know if I'd ever do it. I kind of want to, though. I'd like to experience it at least once, though.
Yeah, same here. But to be a dungeon master, I think you really have to. You really have to love it.
You gotta love it, yeah. And the passion of dungeon masters, I can go out to them. It's
yeah,
you're the ones doing all the heavy lifting.
Yeah, but anyway, we are not going to talk about Baldur's Gate 3 today. Today we are back to our regularly scheduled programming.
I know, it was so nice to hear your
listeners.
It was so nice to hear your intro. It's been so long since I've heard that.
The standard intro, baby. Yeah, we just wrapped up our massive epic series on Band of Brothers, which before we move on to an actual movie here, we spent so much time talking about especially toward the end of that last episode about these really tough decisions that well, not necessarily tough decisions, but just the issue, the conundrum that local townspeople faced in situations in small rural towns where there were these horrible death camps set up. And I watched this short documentary on Netflix last night called Ordinary Men. Have you seen this? It's narrated by what's his face, Uncle Argyle.
Brian Cox?
I can't remember. Yeah, Brian Cox, who is a great narrator, for the record. I've never heard him narrate anything, but he's fantastic. But anyway, yeah, it goes into, it's a bunch of historians, and it's following one specific death squad. Because, the guys that were tasked with, it's the documentary is called, it's called Forgotten Holocaust. It's like Ordinary Men, the Forgotten Holocaust. And kind of what it talks about was that, so many people talk about the death camps and how many people died there, and how many people died in the years leading up to the war. And apparently the part of the Holocaust that's kind of forgotten are the 2 million or so Jewish people that were murdered in the first wave of the murders before before the Nazis decided that the death camps were the most efficient way of doing this horrible thing. Like the first year or two of it, they basically just had these death squads that would round everybody up and just shoot them at point blank range. And a lot of the soldiers that were doing this weren't like Wehrmacht. They weren't, they weren't frontline guys. They weren't the officers. These were guys who had like regular jobs in Germany who had signed up for quote unquote police patrols because they thought it would be safer and keep them away from the front lines.
Yeah.
And they ended up being the ones that got assigned to do all of this horrible shit. But anyway, the documentary is really good. It talks about, it just goes into the sociological reasons why a group of seemingly ordinary men could commit such horrible acts of atrocity and all that. Because, I feel like the narrative around it has been, well, if they couldn't do it, if they didn't do it, they'd be shot, right? That was kind of the post-war narrative. Yeah. And it turns out that wasn't really the case. In a lot of cases with these death squads, the like commanding officer would tell them, look, this is a horrible thing that the Fuhrer is asking us to do. If anybody doesn't want to do it, they don't have to.
Oh, wow.
Like, the commanders would give the guys the option to sit it out. And a lot of the time what would end up happening is they would do it anyway, because what the commander would say is like, well, look, if you sit out, one of your comrades is going to have to do it. And because these guys knew that they were on the front and they weren't going to be back with their families and friends at home anytime soon, they knew that all they really had was this group of soldiers that they were with. And if there's anything we know about human psychology, it's that being ostracized socially in a group of people that you're forced to be with is an incredibly powerful thing. It's sometimes worse pain and torture than physical torture, right? So a lot of these guys, the theory that these historians are making or the point that they're making is that a lot of these guys didn't want to do it, obviously, but they felt like they had to because it was either do that or be ostracized and called a coward by your fellow men. It's like the point is, okay, who gives a fuck? Like, you weren't being forced to do it. Yeah. Like, there's no excuse, right? But it still offers an explanation, because I feel like so many people just think of these soldiers that committed these atrocities as just these mindless killing robots that were just, were thinking of the Jews as just a subhuman race and that they just needed to be exterminated. And like 99% of the time, that wasn't the case. It was just like a diarrhea of social pressure and like not wanting to let your fellow man down and feeling like the war would never end. But most of the time, none of the guys that would say they didn't want to do it would ever get punished. They were never like punished by their commanding officers. Like the officers gave them the out, and it just totally reshapes the narrative of like what those guys were doing. And that's all this fucked up shit, right? Because after the war, these guys that committed these murders, like, and the human mind will do anything that it can to survive, right? And they convince themselves that they're the victims, that like they were tasked with doing this awful, dirty work, and they're the victims that they had to do it. And it's like, it's just crazy what the human mind will do to cope or process with a situation, and how easily men can be coerced to kill under the right circumstances. And they talk a lot about how someone's relationship with the state has so much power, because it's like, if you're these guys and the government that's currently in power says that this is what you need to be doing, and that's what you grew up thinking that you needed to be doing, you can't think past that. You can't think of like another regime being in control until it is, and then realizing that those things you did are wrong. And it just, anyway, it was fascinating because I'd always just sort of assumed, okay, these guys that did this horrible genocide, like they must have been mindless killing machines that didn't, Anyway, it was interesting. It was a little tag onto, because we were talking about that, and it turns out a lot of these guys could have just not done it, and they fucking did it anyway. Yeah. And that's the saddest part of all of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, and I think for that too, it's like, oh gosh, what was I gonna say? It's so, well, because I think it's like a safe assumption, because you're like, if they're willing to kill all these people in these heinous ways, like why wouldn't they be willing to inflict that on somebody that that didn't want to do it, just to like keep things in order. But I mean, the way the Nazis work too, it's like even if that guy didn't do it, it was going to get done somehow. They were going to find a way to keep it going.
Right. And that's what the guys who ended up doing it would say, right? Like if I didn't do it, somebody else would have to. It was going to get done regardless, and I convinced myself that it was better for me to do it than to make my friends do it. Like that's how fucked up it was. Like all those sociological things going on.
But if on the flip side of that too, if like a few thousand more of those guys made a stand, that really could have slowed the war down considerably.
Exactly. So it's almost that much more terrifying. Like it's less scary if you think of them as mindless killing machines, right? It's less scary that way. Because if you think of them as normal people who, under these specific set of circumstances, and because they didn't want to be embarrassed and didn't want to be ostracized socially, like it was that easy for them to do it, that's scary. Because like, what does that say about people? That's just, anyway, moving on. I'm so sorry. I did not mean to Band of Brothers is over.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's this book written by Kurt Vonnegut that Andy really wants me to read. I'll keep it short, but basically, like, this guy goes undercover and ends up infiltrating the SS, but is like an undercover officer in the U.S. military, and basically he's having to portray this role as like this SS officer in order to get information for OSS and give it back to the US, and like basically he's like, I'm doing this as like a necessary evil in order to help win the war. But like at the end of the war, basically he's like locked up and like, well, we can't admit that we knew what you were doing because it makes us look bad. So it's like this really like fucked up moral conundrum where it's like, well, was he right to do that? Did it help people? But also these people that he killed, like, it's just a fascinating like moral question about something like that. So
yeah.
Anyway, we don't have to keep talking about war and the complexities of war.
No, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I need to read some Vonnegut though. I know I do.
Yeah. Yeah, Slaughterhouse 5 is great, and then I'm gonna read Mother Night next, which I've heard is really good also. Anyway.
Yeah. Hey, we're definitely back to One Guy's Seen It because we did our 15 minutes of bullshit before we actually get into the podcast.
We had to fucking help it, man.
Yep, we had to. Okay, but so I am so excited that I get to be the guy who's seen it today.
Yes. I'm excited
because
too.
I get to expose you to yet another weird 90s horror sci-fi movie that I know there's no way you've seen.
Okay.
And another movie that I've only seen because my dad is into weird movies like this and I grew up with them. And because it has one of our I guess you could call him one of our spiritual buddies is stars in this movie. So okay. Let me see if I can get you to guess this. So I'll give you the plot. Okay, I'll use this one. So this is a thrilling tale. Okay, well I guess first I should give you cast. I'll give you cast first. Okay, so 1997.
Okay.
And it stars Tom Sizemore.
Okay.
Penelope Ann Miller and Linda Hunt gets the top billing.
Okay.
Directed by Peter Hyams. It's a horror mystery sci-fi.
Okay.
And I love this IMDb. I love this plot synopsis so much. Okay. A homicide detective and an anthropologist tried to destroy a South American lizard god who's on a people-eating rampage in a Chicago museum. Yes.
Okay. Well, I love Tom Sizemore.
And that's part of the reason I wanted to do this. This was like the first thing I ever saw him in.
Yeah, and I think we know him best through Saving Private Ryan fame.
Right.
Sergeant Horvath in that movie. And then Penelope Ann Miller was in Carlito's Way, I believe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was. And then Linda Hunt. I don't know who Linda Hunt is, but I'm trying to think. Yeah, what?
Let me see if there was anybody else that didn't necessarily get top billing. Hold on.
But the guy, what did you say, Lucas Haim or? The director guy?
The director, Peter Hyams.
Peter Hyams. Okay. Thriller. I mean, the plot should have given it away, but I guess I have no clue then.
I don't think so. I wouldn't have been surprised if this was kind of a straight to VHS type deal, okay. But it wasn't. It wasn't. So I'll give you a little bit of trivia. Let's see if you can guess the name of it.
Okay.
So this is kind of funny. So like I said, it takes place in a museum, right? And then so because the novel, because it was based on a novel, portrayed the museum's administration in such an unflattering light. The museum that they wanted to shoot this in turned the film producers down, and Paramount offered them a 7-figure sum of money to film there. But the museum administration was worried that a monster movie would scare kids away from the museum. So, really, the Chicago Field Museum of Natural History came in clutch. They loved the premise and allowed them to shoot there because the Natural History Museum in Chicago is dinosaurs, and there's like already monsters there. Really,
Is that where?
So
no, I was like, is that where Night of the Museum? But that's New York, I think.
Yeah, I think that's New York.
Anyway, sorry.
No, it's okay. I thought that was interesting. This movie was originally projected to be a box office dud due to the movie having no real stars in it.
Oh,
and
interesting.
The success of films like Scream had been like kind of sort of basic ass slashers had been dominating the box office. Mm-hmm. But on opening weekend, it performed 5 times higher than expected.
Damn.
Reports.
I wonder, does it say what month this came out? Because I'm just curious if it was January.
Let me see. I don't think so.
Because a lot of those...
I'm not seeing a month.
A lot of those studios like tend to put out like their dud horror movies like in January. I don't know why that became a thing, but it was a big thing. I think we talked about this on the Strangers episode, but basically like that was just a way to like filter out all your bad shit and try to make a profit off of. So like January was like notoriously like a bad month. Go see like a quality movie in the movie theater. And
interesting.
So like if there was like not another, or if it was like the best perceived option, like it could have made a killing. But I mean, like,
yeah, I'm trying to stay on my perfect streak of never actually showing you a classic or good movie. I'm gonna leave all those to you.
I feel like you've had one that I actually liked, but it was unintentional. But it was Species I liked.
Oh yeah, you liked Species, and so this kind of sits in the same vein for me. I don't really think it's as good, and I haven't seen it in a really, really long time.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to get back into it. But it was one of my dad's favorites. But the name of the movie is The Relic.
Oh, you know what?
From 1997.
I've heard of the title, and I think it was like on Prime or something, and I think I put it on my list because I was like, I don't know, just a weird random movie from that time period. And
yeah.
I was
late 90s were an awesome time for weird fucking movies.
I put that on my list, and like Leviathan was another one that I haven't seen yet, but just like those like big budget 90s like horror movies.
Yeah, man.
Because I was like, if Jeff picks one, I wanted to stump him. I was like, I actually have seen that.
So I've kept my streak alive.
Yeah, it's just I put it on my list, but I guess I had no intention of ever actually watching it.
You put it on your try to stump Jeff list?
Yeah, well, it's like, you can like set up your watch list on those streaming services, and I just put a shit ton of movies on there that I think sound interesting.
Yeah, it's a challenge to have to dig through that list all the time and find movies that I thought for sure you hadn't seen that turns out you've seen. It's been very frustrating. Which is why I'm having to resort to weird ass horror sci-fi movies from the late 90s. I mean, eventually I'm going to run out of these and I'm going to have to pivot.
Yeah, it's I think only you stumped me because I think you'd seen In Bruges. I think that has only happened one time.
Yeah, probably only once.
Damn.
But anyway, I think we've done enough bullshitting. Are you ready to watch this piece of shit and get really drunk?
I am, yeah. I'm really drunk, man.
Well, all fuck right. Yeah, let's do it. This has been One Guy's Seen It. We're going to take a short break. You're going to hear that trumpet sound. And remember, spoilers are on the way. All right. All right. It was hard not to apologize repeatedly before we even got back on this podcast. The Relic.
The Relic.
The Relic, Sumner.
Quite the movie film, as those would say.
Tom Sizemore.
Yeah, when I saw him, I was like, you know what? I feel like Michael Madsen could have played this very easily.
It definitely felt like it's the exact same era as Species. It almost feels like a sister movie. Like they could have come out in the same month.
Yeah.
I do think Species was a much better movie for a lot of reasons.
Absolutely. Like the Relic makes Species look like a masterpiece in comparison. Species is honestly kind of brilliant in comparison. But there are a couple of moments that genuinely made me laugh, and then there are moments that made me laugh because it was so ridiculous.
Yes, okay, so I agree with you, and I have to start too by saying the only reason I've even seen this movie, I'm hard pressed to imagine any real reason why anyone would ever see this movie, but my dad, there was a time period in his life when he was on the road all the time, traveling for work, where he would go through like a book a day. I mean, he would while he was on the road, he would stop at wherever and pick up like 10 books for whatever trip he was going on. And most of them were these like horror sci-fi novels. I mean, that was his thing. And he just blazed through them. And I remember as a little kid, I was a kid, him saying that this was one of his favorite books, and he was really excited for me to watch the movie. And I honestly probably haven't seen it since then. And But I'm with you. There were moments throughout this movie that somehow felt like it was 4 hours long.
Oh my god.
And I don't understand that because it really wasn't that long. It just felt like it was so fucking long. And that has a lot to do with the fact that so little was happening. But anyway, there were some moments that like you said, there were some really good moments that kept me in. It's like just when I'd start to like check the fuck out, something would there'd be a line or something would happen that would kind of reel me back in. And anyway, I don't know where you want to start. My notes are just fucking random.
Dude, mine are all over the place. Like I think there was a moment midway through I was like, I gotta stop taking so many notes because I'm missing so much of this movie, it feels like. But when I looked up, like, so we'll get into all the technical elements. I think we should just start at the beginning.
Okay.
But there was a vibe I got as the movie went along. I was like, okay, so the book is probably 300 or 400 pages, like standard novel length, I'm imagining. And it seems like they're trying to cram everything from the book, like a 300-page book potentially, into like a 100-page screenplay, and it feels like that. Like they're trying to cram so much information so quickly to the point where the editing is so fast, and not even in a way that I could really put my finger on. It's not like, I don't know, it's not like watching like a Michael Bay like action scene where it's like there's a cut every couple seconds, but like the dialogue is so on top of each other. So it's like a character will finish their line, then immediately the character will start saying the next line. You don't even have time to process what the last person just said. And I gotta say, like, the weakest element of the movie is the editing. The editing is so atrocious in it.
Yeah, there were whole sections of what you're talking about where it was like you said, they tried to cram so much into a short period of time, and you just can't, especially if you were trying to take notes at the same time. I can't imagine how you kept up with some of that.
My brain, like, literally is bleeding right now. I'm like trying to like I think that's why I was
your hypothalamus has been removed.
Yeah, my hypothalamus is gone. I got decapitated multiple times. But it was like, but that was the thing. That's why I was so far behind you, I think, because I was like 15 minutes, because I would have to stop the movie in order to get my thoughts together.
Could any of these rituals happen to have to do with ripping out the human hypothalamus? The hyperwhatamus? Oh, never mind.
Oh, never mind. That's all I need, Doctor. And that was... So I guess... Okay, so we should start at the beginning with...
Right, sorry. I'm just going to keep getting sidetracked.
Oh, one cool thing. The guy who did the creature effects for the creature that you don't really see that much in the movie, which I think is kind of cool. I
think I saw in the trivia you technically only get 4 minutes total of screen time of the monster.
Which is, it honestly didn't look that bad. It looked way better than the creature did in Species, for sure.
Agreed. There were some really iffy special effects, like terrible sci-fi channel movie bad special effects, like when the monster's tongue was on Dr. Green.
Oh yeah,
there were some moments where
yeah,
this would have. Well, no, just the special effects are really bad, and I'm sure it helped.
Oh yeah,
because you're watching on a 720p TV, right? And I'm sure that when people were watching
it's 1080.
this, 1080. Sorry,
yeah.
1080. Don't mean
it's
to shit on your
standard.
TV.
Get the fuck
Standard. But I imagine on VHS on a shitty TV that it looked a lot better, but in 4K on my 55-inch, the visual effects were struggling.
That is a superior way to watch this movie, I think, is on VHS.
Yeah, it needs to be watched on a 20-inch television. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep going all around. I don't know about you. It seemed like 90% of this movie was just in the dark. And the vast majority of it was for no reason. Like, I understand there's like a point midway through the movie when the quote-unquote power goes out in the museum.
Yeah.
And I noticed this bizarre thing that happened where somehow when the power went out, a lot of the scenes were lit better than they were before the power went out. Like, when they're having the gala, the huge gala exhibit opening, the lights in the museum are just off. For some reason, like every scene is in the dark, and I get trying to like set a mood or whatever, but it got to a point where it was all I could think about. It was like, why is this scene dark? Why is this scene dark? Is this really necessary? Anyway, sorry, that's a random thing.
No, I completely agree with you. That was my other like thing. Like, so like the editing was bad, but I don't know if I could really blame the editor completely. Like, I feel like it didn't have a lot to work with. Because the shot compositions were so bizarrely close. Like, it was to the point where you didn't have a way to orient yourself of, like, the space that you were in. So, like, every cut was so jarring and weird.
Yeah.
Like, all over the place. Because it would, like, cut to really tight close-ups of their face. But you didn't... I mean, you knew vaguely where they were. Like, we're in the lab now. Or we're in the gala area. But it's just... It's all these tight close-ups where it's like, but you can't even orient, especially when the action starts, it gets really disorienting. Like, you have no idea what's happening. Like, you know vaguely, like, they're being chased or something like that, but you don't really have time to figure out what the specifics are that are happening. But yeah, the cinematography, like the lighting and shit, it was to the point where there were whole scenes where it wasn't even, you couldn't see the characters at all. It was literally just silhouette of everybody's character.
Yeah, it feels like half the movie was the deputy and the people running through the tunnel. It was like the same shot over and over and over and over again. And I was just like, and you know what's funny too? It's when you've seen a movie once in your distant past, right? You remember flashes of it, really. Like, I just vaguely remembered flashes of this movie, and now I know why I remembered what I remembered, which was dark tunnels. That's all I remember. Like going into this, and now I see why, because that's literally 75% of the movie is just people in dark tunnels. And you know, even like at the end of Species, you get too much of the whole dark tunnel underneath the city thing. And this was just excessive.
Yeah, and this is like, it's very similar to like the final showdown in Species, where they're like in like the tunnel basement like sewer system thing, which oh god, there's so much to talk about. But
there's a lot to talk about, and it's hard not to jump around, because the thing is, like, we could talk about the plot, right, which is just pretty straightforward. I mean, there's a reason the plot summary standard. Is one line on IMDb. I mean, you've got this this fake Indiana Jones anthropologist guy studying this South American tribe, and he comes across a relic and brings it onto
ayahuasca.
a boat. Yeah, that was honestly the opening scene was probably the best scene in the movie.
I love the idea of him. He has this moment where the guy hands him the drink, and he's just like, he just has this little shrug. It's like, it's almost comical. He's like, oh, fuck it, I'll take. He takes the drink, and then the guy in the tribe who's like dressed the most standard tribal person like outfit you can imagine. Like bones and like red paint and all that stuff. And he's sitting on the ground, he's tripping from whatever they gave him. And the guy doesn't really do anything like that bad to him. Like he just like, he like starts like trying to freak him out. He's like crawling on all fours. He's like, "Ooh!" And the guy just starts screaming like profusely. He's just like, "Ah, ah."
That's what Chris was going through the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, pretty much.
On
on his crazy mushroom trip. Remember I told you about that, where he was connected to the stars.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it's been where he was like glued to his chair and we couldn't move him.
Oh no, I did hear that. Yeah.
Yes, but anyways, great opening scene.
Yeah, and then he's looking for his crates, and they're like about to be on this ship or something like that. So he like, I don't know. There's this whole weird thing where he like has to sneak on the ship to get his crates on there or something like that. And
yeah, I think he somehow or another he's found out what the danger of what he has decided to ship back, which is the leaves with whatever this fungus is on them.
Right.
And I guess he's trying to get him off the ship.
So this is my biggest plot hole with the movie, which is something that kind of gets confirmed at the end of the movie, which I don't think makes sense at all. So he's in Brazil studying this tribe, and he gets on the boat at the beginning of the movie, and like that's kind of the last you see of him is on the boat. He's like, my specimens aren't here. And we find out later that the guy, what was his name? Winston? What was his name?
Yeah, James Winfield or something. I can't even remember. John Whitney or something, yeah.
Yeah, and so, yeah, it's like the last you see of him is on the ship. And then the ship ports in Chicago. So going from Brazil all the way up north, he would have had to have been on the same ship, right?
Yeah, and to add to the plot hole, you remember the deputy says that the Navy found the ship floating out there and had to bring it back to dock. Anyway, but continue.
It's in one of the Great Lakes. It's not like in New York or something like that where they could like dock from Brazil. Like they're in the middle of the Great Lakes, so like the ship would have had to have been brought over land to be in the Great Lakes. It doesn't make any sense.
I think that's why in the trivia it said this was supposed to take place, I think, in a New York museum, which would have made more sense. And
that makes way more sense
in Chicago because the other museum didn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
So don't focus on the details, you know.
Yeah. But I was thinking about that early on. I was like, why would they do it in Chicago? Why wouldn't they do it in New York? Like a port that could be from, it's like a sea port. Like it doesn't. Yeah. It's not a lake. Anyway, just like geographical detail, which drove me nuts. From the beginning, I was like, that's going to be a big thing. I feel it.
Yeah, and to add to your point, you find out, obviously, toward the end of the movie, I don't even care about jumping ahead, that the beast, the monster, is partially that guy's DNA, John Whitney or whatever, right? So somehow or another, he got onto the ship in Brazil and I guess consumed the fungus or ate, because the whole deal is
because he drank the thing with the fungus probably. Anyway.
I guess that could have been what happened. That could have been what happened. My dumb brain was like, because the only context I had was that like he got on the ship and he accidentally ate some of it off of one of the leaves when he was looking through the crates. But you remember he opens his crate when he's on the ship and he like cries out in anguish that like something is missing. Like he opens it and he's like looking around for something and he's clearly upset that something is missing. And then we don't it's like you said, it's just really unclear at the beginning. First of all, how the ship fucking ends up at Port Period in Chicago, which is ridiculous. But on top of that, how he as the monster ends up getting into the museum. Like, you could say that he was in one of the crates, I guess, but the story that the lieutenant comes up with is that he came through the tunnels into the museum chasing the scent of the bacteria. But how would he get off the ship without anyone seeing if the ship was found floating and brought to dock? I just don't.
Yeah. They try to explain it away like in the last 20 minutes of the movie, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but none of these things are important, Sumner. None of these things are important. What's important?
Plot holes don't matter.
What's important is the hypothalamus. And
Sorry, Andy's coughing. Are you okay?
Andy, you didn't make her watch this abomination, did you?
No. She was asleep, fortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean but honestly, I don't think it's not the worst thing ever. It was just the execution was so bad, I feel like. Yeah,
the things that saved it for me were there were honestly some really hilarious lines of dialogue throughout that were just enough to kind of hook me. I think one of the best lines in the movie is when you get introduced to the old guy who's the museum curator or whatever, or manager. And, they're having this argument. Dr. Green is talking about
we get introduced to her. And,
we get...
Edna Mode pops up.
Yes, Edna Mode. I don't know what other movies she's been in, but it was awesome to see her in this.
Yeah, she looks familiar. I couldn't put my finger on it either, though.
Yeah,
anyway,
but,
sorry.
It's cool that they made Edna look a lot like her in The Incredibles. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we get this conversation right where Dr. Green is they're talking about superstition with the old guy, and they're explaining why he and Edna Mode are explaining to her why the superstition exhibit's important to get people in the door, and Dr. Green is like, I think having the superstition exhibit's like having topless ushers at the ballet, and the old guy's like, hey, that actually might get me to the ballet. I was like, that got a chuckle out of me.
Yeah, there were some funny moments that caught me off guard that I thought were funny, like the mayor talking about his wife in that really weird scene.
Yeah, I wrote that down too. He was a highlight.
Yeah, he was like out of nowhere, he's like on the phone. He's like, "Oh, we're gonna go to this gala tonight. Have you seen my wife's cleavage?" And he's like, "What?"
It's all over the papers.
It's all over the papers. Just like out of nowhere for no reason. It was so stupid. And then, So basically, the whole thing with her having her lab research in the museum. I'm not disputing the fact that could be a thing, but that seemed like a little insane. And they had like a lab underneath the museum, which could be a thing. I have no idea if that's true or not.
Yeah, I don't know enough. I don't know enough about it either. I can't help but think too that there felt like some attempted parallels to Jurassic Park. I mean, this was a few years after Jurassic Park, and it had been so successful. I think that this author was writing in the same space as Michael Crichton or whatever at the time.
Yeah.
And it felt like there were some elements of it that felt very attempted Jurassic Parkian that just didn't come off as well.
Yeah, I it's so funny you said that because I wrote down like it's like Jaws meets Jurassic Park meets Alien, like all wrapped into one movie.
Yeah, it's trying really hard and somehow fails to be most of them.
Yeah, because there's like the thing with the lady at the gala. She's like, "Oh, this is our big event of the evening. We can't cancel it." Even though, like, the security guard gets murdered brutally, like, the day before.
Yeah, and honestly, the practical effects on his body were awesome.
They were pretty good.
You talked about the fact that
really good.
The book... You talked about the fact that it seemed like it was a really long book that was super detailed, and they tried to cram as much as they could. And I think you really feel that in the scene with the medical examiner when she's... like, because her lines are great. Yeah. It was like 7 decapitations in 1 week. Don't you just hate someone who always takes head but never gives it? I was like, that's a line that had to be from the book. Like, it was too good to have anything to do with.
That was actually funny. So it was like that had to have been coming from somewhere else.
Yeah, but we do have to say R.I.P. to the security guard guy. I mean, he was having a little pot on the potty.
Yeah, I just felt bad for him. But it was like, it's like the first 20 minutes of the movie, and it's like, oh, he's already dead. Shit. Okay.
Yeah.
But I do love that scene where the Tom Sizemore's character comes down. He's like, oh, we're investigating the body downstairs, and then what's her face just walks in while
she's like, oh my god,
and he puts on this face. He's like, get her out of here.
Get her out of here.
Big frown. It was one of the most laugh out loud moments to me in the movie, and it was completely unintentional.
Because I just can't. Yeah, and I just you bring up a point, like, without meaning to, but like, it just makes me realize how much better this would have been if it was set in New York. Because, like, I get that everybody had this kind of Chicago vibe, like Chicago accent vibe, but if they were full-on New Yorkers, it would have been even better. Like, they could have just leaned into that more. It just felt like budget New York in this movie for some reason.
And that's the thing too. It's like, you could have set it in Chicago. It could have been any port on the East Coast, and it would have made sense. I don't know why you had to be like Chicago specifically. You didn't even have to say the name of the city, honestly.
Yeah.
So it was just a weird choice that they were like, we're going to make it in Chicago, which doesn't make any geographical sense. You couldn't even made it on the West Coast. It wouldn't have mattered. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was such a weird choice to make it in Chicago. But anyway, I digress.
What's this guy doing? Starting a hypothalamus collection?
Jeez. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, we have to talk about, and I know this might be jumping forward a little bit,
No.
but we get Uncle Richie as security guard number 2.
I wrote that down. I was like, Richie Aprile shows up as the guy on the cams.
Yeah,
which I was like, I had to wait until I saw his full face because he was obscured so many times. Like, and
because the movie was all in the dark.
But I was like, I had to wait for them to come back. I was like, is that Richie? I couldn't tell.
God, dude, yeah, it was like the cast saved it in a lot of places, like kept me hooked. But it wouldn't have otherwise. Like, I don't know. Anyway,
yeah, I did. I feel like there are moments of really good, like, stuff. It was just like they were just blowing through it so fast you didn't even have time to breathe, kind of thing. And then Brooks from Shawshank Redemption, the old guy, is, the old man curator guy, who's really good. I liked him a lot.
He was good. There was just enough good acting to keep it all alive, and some of it was just hilarious and insane enough that it was entertaining. Like, what was probably the most entertaining 45-second stretch of this entire movie is when all the alarms go off, right? After this decapitated body falls onto the spikes in the middle of the exhibit during the gala, and you've got all these people sprinting through the museum and panicking and running away, which is hilarious in and of itself. But then they get up to the doors and they trample this woman against the glass and kill her. I wrote that down too.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just fucking really bizarre. And then, like, very quickly, like, it goes into the thing you're talking about the weird editing and how fast everything's happening. Just head first, someone just dives through the glass wall. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that probably would not happen. I mean, think about how hard you'd have to be running to break through. Like, first of all, that's fucking ridiculous. But everybody, it's this comical adventure. They get outside the walls. They all start tripping over each other down the museum stairs and just barrel rolling. And it was fucking hilarious. Like, it was the best scene in the movie. Dude, and then Collingsworth, right, the deputy guy, in a last-ditch effort to stop the doors from closing, grabs this rickety-ass wooden chair and does this, like, slip and slide, belly slide on his stomach for 20 feet while holding the chair out. Like, this physically impossible feat just to get there in time for the door to completely crush the chair. But that had to be the best scene in the movie.
I wrote that down immediately because I was like, I love that he thought that was going to work. Like, this huge 20-ton metal door, and he's like, this wooden chair will stop it. But I just love the fact that it crushes immediately. It was just for nothing, and it was hilarious. I loved it.
Yeah, the movie hit its stride when everybody was panicking and trying to escape the museum.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, and like you said, with the woman who got like thrown up against the glass and like she spits out blood and stuff, like it was very like I don't know if you, like Roger Corman, like 70s-esque. Like he did he did like these exploitation movies. I think Piranha is one of his most famous ones, which is a famous ripoff of Jaws, basically.
Right.
With piranhas.
Yeah, Piranha's terrible.
Yeah, and but I mean, like the horror scenes of people trampling over each other was very Roger Corman-esque, and just like the weird exploitation horror for absolutely no reason. But I did appreciate it though, because
you have to.
That was another thing I noticed, because it's like the script really works more if it's a suspense thriller, but they tried really hard to make it like an action horror thing, even though the suspense was really like the basis of the screenplay, it seemed like, because you don't see the monster for a very long time. It's really like, it's supposed to be like moody and atmospheric, I feel like, because you're just like, something's weird's going on with this place, but you never really feel that because everything's going so fast.
Yeah.
And they're like trying to throw in all these weird jump cuts with like cats and rats and like, anything that they can think of to jump scare you with out of nowhere for no reason.
Right. Like cleaning ladies with inhalers.
Yeah, it was just like, it was like some studio got the script. He's like, well, we got to spice it up a bit, because people are going to get bored, which I don't know, maybe true, but I mean, like, but I don't know. I just feel like it would have worked better if they were like trusted the material enough.
Yeah.
To be like, we're just going to let this breathe and let this be what it is.
Dude, I think you're really onto something, because what made the book so successful were the people that loved it, were people that loved all of the nitty-gritty science detail suspense of it. And I think you're 100% right. I think they probably got a hold of the script and were like, okay, well, there's not as much of a market for that right now as there probably is for slasher monster movie, so let's just try to meet in the middle. And I think the movie suffered overall as a result.
Yeah, I agree. And
you're onto something there.
Yeah, and it's just it's a shame, because I don't think it had to be bad. I just think the director, whoever the guy was, it was just like, you could tell the actors really, and this is just my interpretation, but it seems like they didn't know half of what they were saying most of the time. They were just saying it as quickly as they possibly could.
Yeah, no, it's so funny you point that out. There's a scene where Dr. Green, when she's first examining the DNA from the beetle, when she's supposed to be focusing on her speech or whatever.
Which is another like little jump scare moment for no reason.
Yes, yeah, when the beetle jumps out of the styrofoam, because that's what you keep precious lab materials in, is a styrofoam container. But anyway, I digress. The beetle. So anyway, she's doing the DNA test on the beetle, and she's like naming all these enzymes and proteins that are in it. And I had subtitles on, and one of the proteins or enzymes or whatever was oxytocin. It was spelled oxytocin. It's just how it's pronounced, oxytocin. And she said oxytoxin. Like, you could just, it was just a moment where I was like, oh my God. Like, clearly, she's just rattling this shit off. She doesn't know what any of it means. It's
right.
They probably one-taked this and don't. They're like, nobody's going to care.
It's funny you said, because I heard that and I didn't even think twice about it. I was just like, oxytoxin. But I know oxytocin. It's like, like the chemical opioid in the brain or whatever.
Yeah. It was clearly just an script oversight, and they were like, fuck it, who cares? Nobody's gonna notice.
Well, and like, that's the thing too, it's like, you can tell this is written by a Hollywood screenwriter and not like somebody who had like a labor of love over the material or anything like that. Like, they had read the book once or twice and were like, I can turn that into something.
Yeah. But rest in peace, Uncle Richie. He didn't live long.
Yeah.
We didn't really get to see his death. It was in the darkness. Like most of the movie.
Yeah. I did have a funny thing with Dr. Green, played by Penelope Ann Miller. the way she's dressed, especially when she has her glasses on, she looks exactly like Joan Cusack from School of Rock. I don't know.
She does. Yes, totally.
It was just the way she was dressed. I was just like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Are you warm?
Are you warm?
This monster turned me into something I never wanted to be. A bitch."
So good.
Yeah, it's just oh, and then that woman. So this is a funny, weird editing choice. I don't know why they cut back to her so much, but there's this woman who recreates this artifact for like 40 minutes.
Yeah, dude, that seemed like, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, it was funny because like you get the feeling like there's something weird's gonna happen with this because they keep cutting back to it for some reason. Like her recreating it and like stitching it together to get it ready for the gala. And like in my head, I was like, oh, something's gonna happen with it. Something's gonna be weird. Like she's gonna like ignite something or no, you just watch her recreate it for the show and then it's in the show later. It was just, yeah, it was totally random, but they cut back to it like 3 or 4 times. Like it was enough to where I noticed that they kept cutting back to it.
Yeah, and you really think, okay, well, the monster's probably like trying to hunt this thing down and it's gonna kill her next or whatever. Yeah, it really seemed like some kind of foreshadowing was being set up and it was all just it was a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah, it was just like, just we gotta pad out the runtime a little bit. Build some tension where there isn't any.
Yeah. And, it's... I can't help you were talking about Dr. Green's clothing. There's this... God, man, there's this scene where... it's right after Old Man Shawshank gets munched. And for the record, that scene where the monster just, like, walks up and stares at him... And did you notice his face? He just looks up at it with this like toothless smile. He's like, hey.
He's like, oh,
like it was so weird. I was like, what is this? But anyway, when
like, what did the director tell that guy to like? What should you be feeling right now?
Yeah, like what exactly? What is on the fucking screenplay? Anyway, when Sizemore and Dr. Green come back in, and he's like, oh, you don't look at him.
And she does again.
She does again, just to spite him. And when she realizes that he's dead, she has this moment where she like takes her heels off, like like now I mean business. She clicks off her heels and she's like, let's go. Like she's clicked into survival mode now.
Yeah.
And I just God. There was so much I wanted to love about this movie, and so much of it I did just because it's a product of the time, and there were so many movies around this period that I love. And it was it's a monster slasher from the 90s. Like there's a lot that's great and cheesy and camp about it. I just wanted it to be better.
That's what I enjoyed about like these like weird little retrospectives like of like the slasher genre. It's like definitely a movie from a bygone era, and even though it's only like 25 years old, it's still, it's like it feels like a different era completely. It's like almost like a weird 80s movie. Like it's like 10 years too late to be an 80s movie.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I feel like it almost feels like we're playing the Dark Pictures games sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, so there was this one line in there that I wrote down because I was so confused by it, and I was curious if you knew what it meant, or like you had an idea what it meant. It was kind of like towards the beginning-ish of the movie. The lady, Edna Mode, curator lady, is talking to the lieutenant, and she says a line. She's like, "Have you ever had smoked salmon? If you don't catch a man, it'll." There's going to be 300 pounds of it or something like that. And I wrote it down. I was like, what the fuck does that mean? I have no idea what she's trying to say.
So it's simpler than you think. So what she was saying is like, if you don't catch this murderer, she's talking about the hors d'oeuvres that are going to be served at the party. There's like 300 pounds of salmon. And she's like, if you don't catch this guy, you're going to have to take it home because we're going to have nothing to do with this 300 pounds of food for this party.
Okay, gotcha.